Hello. I have a couple of things to say before I start my video, and the first thing is what I keep on forgetting to say. Please like and subscribe, and especially check your subscription. I'm losing subscribers, and I suspect it's because YouTube is sort of cleaning out the subscribers. I've had several complaints from people telling me their subscribe button has disappeared and they've had to do it all again. So just do that. Like and check your subscription. And also, again, anyone who feels like contributing, well, it's always very welcome. But it's the like and subscribe that's really important. The other thing was, a lot of people have complained that I'm coming up yellow. Yeah, well, that's because I'm having trouble with the lighting in this attic room. But I'm hoping that this video will be a lot better, because a very nice subscriber who happens to be a filmmaker gave me a lesson on how to adjust the colour on my videos. So with any luck, I'll either come out looking really the right shade and tones throughout, or it'll be a horrible mess, one or the other. Because I'm using a program called DaVinci Resolve. It's very nice, but it's a professional piece of software, and sometimes that's worse than useless for a beginner. Okay, now let's talk about definitions. A lot of you who have been watching me long term will know that I get very exercised about people using language sloppily, in this case, the English language, and not always sloppily, but frequently dishonestly. And I'm going to talk about some dishonest use of English now. A year ago, I made a video about the rape scandal which had just about started to creep into the media agora in the United Kingdom. And they were all calling the perpetrators grooming gangs. Every single one of them. It was as if they had actually reached an agreement. I don't know whether they had, or whether it's just a sign that media people all think in the same way, or whether it was some sort of directive from above. But it's interesting because they all used the same word. And now, in some countries, like France, for instance, they have some sort of an institute which directs the language you use. France set this up in order to stop French from being anglicised with English expressions like le weekend or computer or something. They came up with names of their own for these. I don't think they succeeded with le weekend anyway, but there were others where they found a French word and they insisted that the media used that word in order to make people think French about these various gadgets and developments. In the United Kingdom, there is no such organisation. So you can't really blame a central organisation for this consensus among newspapers. But there is one. In my last video, I spoke about Tommy Robinson's Free Speech Award in Denmark, and I was astonished, nay, flabbergasted and shocked to discover that not one British newspaper had any news about Tommy Robinson's award at all. Nothing. Zilch. Nada. Nothing. Somehow they all thought the same on that, and somehow they're all thinking the same about the grooming gangs. It's possible they're just taking their lead from the BBC, out of sheer laziness. I don't know. I'm just pointing that out. Anyway, in last year's video, the one I made about this, I said they were not grooming gangs. That's the wrong word. They weren't even rape gangs. What I said was that they are slave traders. And I was just as certain that that was what they should be called as I was equally certain that no one would ever call them that apart from me. Because it's just too embarrassing to admit that you people and your society has allowed itself to become prey to slavery. After all, that's what happens to semi-literate foreigners, isn't it? Not to the proud British. However, I was wrong in one thing. The other day I saw a video made by Sargon in which he referred, if I remember what it was and find it, I'll put a link in the description. But during that video, Sargon referred to the cover-up over the whole grooming gang business, and he used the word slavery. Good for you, Carl, because that's what it is. Actually, though, I have noticed that the British media have somewhat changed their definition, because they're not using the word slavery. They're still using the word grooming gang, but now they're also starting to slip in the word paedophilia. Now, although some of the girls who were abused in this way were underaged and some as young as 11, which is, by the way, 2 years older than Muhammad's wife, Aisha, when he consummated their marriage. Okay, some of the girls were as young as 11, but many of them were over 16, so technically that wasn't paedophilia. But the media still don't want to use the word slavery, because for slavery you need a social setup. Paedophilia, on the other hand, is seen as an aberration, and the child is seen as a victim, but the rest of society is perfectly all right, because paedophilia is generally something that goes on in secret. There's no secret about slavery. It's a social institution which requires the agreement of the law to enforce it. So these men, and remember, that word is being used in its broadest possible term. You've got to call them men because you've got to acknowledge that they're part of our humanity. And normally a lot of people refer to others who are not so nice as animals. But, well, I have a lot to do with animals, and I wouldn't offend them by calling these things animals. So men is the only word I've got left. Anyway, those men were, well, for goodness sake, they were branding the girls. They were branding them. I don't know whether you've read this, but some of the girls were branded by their owners, by these men who thought of themselves as the owners of these girls. Is this paedophilia? No, it is not. It is slavery. So let's just get the definition straight, because until we do, we can't sort out the problem for what it is. People who take slaves are people who constitutionally believe they're superior and therefore have that right. Such people must be made to know that they're not superior and they don't have that right. And to do that, we have to say it like it is. Now, like it is that these men are Muslims, and Islam condones slavery. In fact, it encourages it. Yes, it also says very categorically that it's a good thing to free slaves. But I'm sorry, making you a slave and then freeing you isn't what I'd call the right way round. That's like, well, kicking you in the crotch and then giving you a truss. Anyway, Islam encourages slavery, polygamy, and FGM, and the philosophy that anyone who is not a Muslim is not a whole human being and has some rights, reduced rights, only at the discretion of the Muslim ruling over him or her. These are philosophies directly at odds with the way we've developed our societies in the West, and we should define that and stick to it. Oh, and also there's another consensus word doing the rounds. The crimes being committed by these groups are now being referred to as a rape epidemic. It isn't an epidemic. When German soldiers marched into the British Channel Islands and started applying disgusting racial laws and military rules, that wasn't an epidemic of Nazism. It was a takeover. So we haven't had a rape epidemic here, and we don't have grooming gangs. We have slave traders operating with the sanction of the social services, the police, the law courts, the councils, and even the Cabinet Office. Because some of you may be aware that when this was brought to the attention of Gordon Brown's government in the early 2000s, a directive was sent out to the various organs I have just listed, that these girls are making an informed choice, and it will be culturally insensitive to interfere. Let's just get our definitions straightened out, should we? They are slave traders, and they have been until recently operating with the sanction of the government, various organs of government, and we have to hold them to account for that.